If God is for this black CEO, no enemy can stand against her morning prayer. Mrs. Henderson, you need to leave this building immediately. The board has voted and you no longer have authority here. Mr. Mitchell, I have every right to be in this boardroom, and before this day ends, you'll understand exactly why. The tension in the executive boardroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria Henderson stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a navy blue suit that spoke of both power and dignity. Her dark eyes, calm but intense, locked onto Robert Mitchell, the board chairman who had just tried to force her out of her own company. Around the massive table sat 12 board members, their faces a mixture of confusion, discomfort, and anticipation. Security guards stood by the doors, uncertain whether to act. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown Chicago high-rise seemed to spotlight Victoria, as if heaven itself was watching this confrontation unfold. Robert Mitchell's face had turned red. Robert Mitchell tapped his pen against a thick folder of documents. The vote was 8-4, Victoria. You've been removed as CEO effective immediately. Henderson Technologies will be absorbed into Apex Corporation by end of business today. It's over. Victoria took a slow breath. Victoria didn't raise her voice. Victoria simply smiled the kind of smile that comes from a lifetime of facing down bigger battles than this. "Oh, Robert," Victoria said softly, "this isn't over. This is just beginning. But let's go back to how this all started." It was just 4 hours earlier when Victoria Henderson woke up in her modest South Side Chicago apartment, the same neighborhood where Victoria had grown up in the 1960s. The alarm clock read 5:30 a.m. Victoria Henderson had always been an early riser, a habit formed during Victoria's childhood when Victoria's mother, Dorothy, would wake Victoria before dawn to pray before school. Even now, at 62 years old and running a multi-million-dollar technology company, Victoria began every day the same way Victoria's mother had taught Victoria on Victoria's knees in prayer. "Lord, I don't know what this day will bring," Victoria prayed in the quiet of Victoria's bedroom, "but I know you are with me. If you are for me, no weapon formed against me can prosper." Victoria didn't know how prophetic those words would be. After Victoria's prayer, Victoria prepared breakfast simple oatmeal with blueberries, just like Victoria's mother used to make. Victoria's apartment wasn't fancy. Despite running Henderson Technologies, a company Victoria had built from nothing over 30 years, Victoria still lived simply. The walls displayed photographs spanning decades. A young Victoria in 1965 holding her mother's hand at a civil rights march in Selma. Victoria graduating from Chicago State University in 1983. Victoria standing in front of her first tiny office in 1995 with a hand-painted sign reading, Henderson Technologies. The most prominent photo showed Victoria's mother, Dorothy Henderson, now 85 years old and living in a nursing home on the South Side. Dorothy's face in the photo radiated wisdom and strength, the same strength Dorothy had needed to raise Victoria alone after Victoria's father died in Vietnam in 1968. Victoria picked up her phone and called Dorothy, as Victoria did every single morning. "Good morning, Mama," Victoria said when Dorothy answered. "Good morning, baby girl." Dorothy's voice came through, warm and strong despite Dorothy's age. "You have your board meeting today, don't you?" "I do, Mama, the big one." Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "Victoria, I had a dream last night. I dreamed about your father." Victoria's breath caught. Victoria's mother rarely spoke about Victoria's father anymore. "What did you dream, Mama?" "I dreamed he was standing in a boardroom wearing his uniform and he said, 'Tell Victoria to stand firm. Tell her the truth always comes to light.'" Dorothy paused. "I don't know what it means, baby, but you remember that today. The truth always comes to light." Victoria felt a chill run down Victoria's spine. "I'll remember, Mama, I promise." After Victoria hung up, Victoria got dressed carefully. Victoria chose the navy blue suit, professional, dignified, unshakable. Victoria looked at herself in the mirror. 62 years old, and Victoria could still see the determined little girl who had once declared to her mother that someday Victoria would build something that would help people and honor her father's memory. Henderson Technologies had done exactly that. Victoria had started the company in 1995 with a single computer and a dream to bring affordable technology education to inner-city schools. What began as Victoria teaching coding classes in church basements had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise providing educational software and technology training programs to underserved communities across America. But lately, things had become difficult. A larger corporation, Apex Corporation, had been trying to buy Henderson Technologies for 2 years. Apex's CEO, a man named Richard Thornton, had made increasingly aggressive offers. Richard Thornton wanted Victoria's company, Victoria's customer base, and Victoria's reputation. Richard Thornton didn't care about Victoria's mission to serve poor communities. Richard Thornton only saw dollar signs. The board meeting today would decide everything. Victoria knew that several board members, led by Robert Mitchell, had been meeting secretly with Richard Thornton. Victoria knew Robert Mitchell was planning to force a vote to sell the company. But Victoria also knew something Robert Mitchell didn't know, something Victoria had discovered just 3 days ago that would change everything. Victoria arrived at the Henderson Technologies building at 7:45 a.m. The building wasn't the fanciest in Chicago, but it was Victoria's. 15 floors of offices where 230 employees worked to fulfill Victoria's mission. As Victoria walked through the lobby, Victoria greeted the security guard, a young man named James Peterson. "Good morning, James," Victoria said warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," James replied with a bright smile. James was 28, a military veteran who had served in Afghanistan. Victoria had hired James 2 years ago through Henderson Technologies' Veteran Employment Program. James reminded Victoria of what her father might have been like had he come home from Vietnam. "Big day today, isn't it, Mrs. Henderson?" James asked. "It is, James, it certainly is." "My grandmother told me to tell you she's praying for you," James said. "She watches your interviews on TV all the time. She says you remind her of the women who marched with Dr. King." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, but Victoria blinked them away. "You tell your grandmother I appreciate those prayers more than she knows." Victoria took the elevator to the 15th floor, where the executive offices and boardroom were located. Victoria's assistant, Maria Rodriguez, was already at her desk. Maria was 55, had been with Victoria for 12 years, and was fiercely loyal. "Good morning, Victoria," Maria said. "The board members are starting to arrive. Mr. Mitchell got here 30 minutes ago." "He's been in the boardroom setting up some kind of presentation." Victoria nodded. "I expected that. Is the envelope I gave you yesterday still secure? Locked in your private safe, just like you asked." "Good. At exactly 9:30, I want you to bring that envelope to the boardroom, no matter what's happening. Can you do that?" Maria looked concerned but nodded. "Of course. Thank you, Maria, for everything." "This is a desperate attempt to... They're authenticated," Victoria said calmly. "I had our legal team verify every email header, every signature, every date. They're real, Robert. The question is, did you know about this?" Robert Mitchell's face turned crimson. This is preposterous. Richard Thornton assured me." "Richard Thornton is a liar and a corporate predator," Victoria said. "And if you've been meeting with him privately without board approval, Robert, you've violated your fiduciary duty." Another board member, an attorney named David Chen, looked up from the documents. "Victoria, if these are genuine, they constitute fraud. Apex made representations to this board that were categorically false." "That's correct, David." Robert Mitchell slammed his hand on the table. "This doesn't change the fundamental problem. This company is failing under your leadership, Victoria. You're so focused on your mission and your programs that you can't see we're circling the drain financially." Victoria stood slowly. Victoria's voice remained steady, but there was steel in it now. "I've built this company from nothing, Robert. I've weathered recessions, market shifts, and competitors who wanted to crush us. Henderson Technologies has survived because we stand for something more than quarterly profits. We stand for giving opportunities to people others have written off. We stand for technology as a tool for justice, not just wealth." "Noble words," Robert Mitchell sneered. "But they won't save this company." "Perhaps not," Victoria said, "but the truth will." Victoria checked her watch. 9:28 a.m. In 2 minutes, Maria would bring the envelope. "Before we vote," Victoria said, "there's one more thing the board needs to see." At exactly 9:30, Maria knocked on the boardroom door and entered, carrying a large manila envelope. Maria's hands trembled slightly as Maria handed it to Victoria. "Thank you, Maria," Victoria said gently. Victoria opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. Victoria's hands were steady, but Victoria's heart pounded. "What is this?" Robert Mitchell demanded. "This," Victoria said, "is the truth. The truth about who really started Henderson Technologies. The truth about where our funding came from. The truth about why this company has always been more than just a business to me." Victoria laid the first document on the table. It was a faded photograph from 1968. "This is my father, Lieutenant Marcus Henderson. He died in Vietnam when I was 5 years old." The board members leaned in to see the photograph of a young black man in military uniform, smiling at the camera. Before my father shipped out, Victoria continued, he wrote letters to me to be opened on my 18th birthday. In those letters, he told me about his dreams. He dreamed of coming home and starting a business that would serve black communities and create opportunities where none existed. Victoria's voice caught slightly, but Victoria pressed on. My father came from nothing. His father worked as a janitor at the Palmer House Hotel for 40 years. His mother cleaned houses, but my father dreamed bigger. He wanted to break the cycle. He wanted to build something that would last, something that would help lift others up. Victoria laid down another document, a life insurance policy. When my father died, my mother received his life insurance benefit, $20,000. In 1968, that was a significant sum. My mother, Dorothy Henderson, could have used that money for so many things. We lived in a 2-room apartment. We sometimes struggled to buy groceries. But do you know what my mother did? Victoria looked around the table. Every board member was listening intently now. My mother saved every penny. For 27 years, my mother worked as a nurse's aide at Cook County Hospital, saving and investing that $20,000. When I graduated from college in 1983, I had student loans and a dream to start a technology education program. But I had no money, no connections, no way forward. Victoria placed another document on the table, a bank statement from 1995. My mother gave me $58,000. That was the life insurance money, carefully invested and saved for 27 years. That was the seed money that started Henderson Technologies. My father's dream, preserved by my mother's sacrifice, became my mission. Tears were streaming down Patricia Williams' face now. Even David Chen looked moved. I never told this story publicly, Victoria said, because my mother didn't want recognition. She just wanted her husband's dream to live. She wanted his death to mean something. Victoria pulled out the final document, a handwritten letter, yellowed with age. This is the last letter my father wrote before he died. It was delivered to my mother 2 weeks after he was killed. I'd like to read part of it now. Victoria cleared her throat and began to read, her voice steady despite the emotion. My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry I won't be there to see our little Victoria grow up. But I need you to promise me something. Don't let my death be for nothing. I've been fighting here for freedom, for justice, for the idea that all men are created equal. When I come home, or if I don't, I want to build something that embodies that ideal. I want to create opportunities for our people, for poor people, for anyone who's been told they can't succeed. I've saved some money. Use it to give Victoria a good life, but also use it to build something bigger than us. Promise me, Dorothy. Promise me my life will count for something. Victoria set down the letter. The room was completely silent except for the muffled sounds of crying. My father died believing in justice and opportunity, Victoria said. My mother spent her life honoring his dream, and I have spent 30 years building this company on that foundation. Henderson Technologies isn't just a business. It's a memorial to my father. It's a fulfillment of his dying wish. It's proof that his life counted. Victoria looked directly at Robert Mitchell. So when you ask me to sell this company to a predator who will destroy everything it stands for, when you ask me to let my father's dream be dismantled for profit, when you ask me to betray my mother's sacrifice, my answer is no. My answer will always be no. Robert Mitchell had gone pale. Robert Mitchell opened his mouth, but no words came out. Patricia Williams spoke first. I withdraw my support for the sale. Victoria, I'm sorry. I should have trusted you. David Chen nodded. I also withdraw my support. This changes everything. One by one, the board members who had pledged to vote for the sale reversed their positions. Within 5 minutes, what had been an 8-4 vote in favor of selling became a unanimous vote against it. Robert Mitchell sat frozen, watching his carefully constructed plan collapse, but Victoria wasn't finished. There's one more thing, Victoria said. 3 days ago, when I received those documents about Apex Corporation, I also received information about how they obtained confidential details about Henderson Technologies' financial situation. Details that should only have been available to board members. Victoria looked at Robert Mitchell. Someone on this board has been feeding information to Richard Thornton. Someone violated their fiduciary duty and betrayed this company's trust. Robert Mitchell stood abruptly. This is slander. You have no proof that I didn't say it was you, Robert, Victoria said quietly. But it's interesting that you assumed I was talking about you. Robert Mitchell's face went from pale to crimson. I was protecting this company. Our finances are struggling, and you thought you knew better than me, Victoria said. You thought my mission was naive. You thought profit mattered more than principle, and you were willing to sell out everything we built to prove yourself right. David Chen stood. "Robert, you need to resign from this board, immediately." Robert Mitchell looked around the table desperately but found no allies. Every board member's face reflected disappointment, anger, or disgust. "After everything I've done for this company," Robert Mitchell said bitterly. "What have you done, Robert?" Victoria asked. "You've been on this board for 5 years. In that time, have you ever visited one of the schools we serve? Have you ever met the students whose lives we've changed? Have you ever talked to the single mothers who learned coding in our programs and now support their families? Have you ever seen what we actually do?" Robert Mitchell had no answer. "I didn't think so," Victoria said. "You saw balance sheets and profit margins. You never saw people. You never saw purpose. And that's why you can't understand why I'll never sell." Now back to where we started, when Robert Mitchell made his final desperate attempt to force Victoria out. Robert Mitchell had been humiliated in front of the entire board, but Robert Mitchell hadn't given up. After the other board members voted to keep Victoria as CEO and reject the Apex acquisition, Robert Mitchell had called for an emergency motion to remove Victoria based on the company's financial performance. "Mrs. Henderson, you need to leave this building immediately," Robert Mitchell had said. "The board has voted and you no longer have authority here." But that vote had never happened. Robert Mitchell had claimed it had, counting on his remaining allies and banking on Victoria being too rattled to challenge him. Robert Mitchell had even called security, ordering them to escort Victoria out. That's when Victoria had replied calmly, "Mr. Mitchell, I have every right to be in this boardroom, and before this day ends, you'll understand exactly why." And now, with all the truth laid bare, Robert Mitchell finally understood. Robert Mitchell gathered his papers slowly. Robert Mitchell's hands shook slightly. "I'll tender my resignation," Robert Mitchell said quietly. "Thank you, Robert," Victoria said. There was no triumph in her voice, only sadness. As Robert Mitchell walked toward the door, Victoria called out, "Robert, wait." Robert Mitchell turned back. "My father wrote in his letter that every man deserves a chance at redemption," Victoria said. "He wrote that even when people make mistakes, we should help them find their way back. I'm not going to pursue legal action against you for the breach of fiduciary duty, but I want you to do something for me." Robert Mitchell waited. "I want you to visit one of our programs, just one, meet the people we serve, see what this company actually does. Then if you still think I'm wrong to put mission before profit, we can part ways and you'll never hear from me again." Robert Mitchell's eyes glistened. "Why would you do that, after I tried to destroy everything you built?" "Because my faith teaches me that no person is beyond redemption," Victoria said simply. "And because I believe that sometimes people do wrong things for what they think are right reasons. You genuinely believed selling was best for the company. You were wrong, but your intentions weren't purely malicious." Robert Mitchell wiped his eyes. "I don't deserve your grace." "None of us deserve grace," Victoria said. "That's what makes it grace." 2 weeks later, Robert Mitchell visited the Henderson Technologies Community Center on the South Side. James Peterson, the security guard, had volunteered to give Robert Mitchell a tour. James took Robert Mitchell through classrooms where teenagers were learning to code. James showed Robert Mitchell the job placement program that had helped over 2,000 people find employment. James introduced Robert Mitchell to a 58-year-old grandmother who had learned web design through Henderson Technologies and now ran her own small business. By the end of the tour, Robert Mitchell was crying. "I had no idea," Robert Mitchell kept saying. "I had no idea." The grandmother, a woman named Loretta Washington, took Robert Mitchell's hand. "Baby, it's not too late to learn. It's never too late to see clearly." Robert Mitchell asked Victoria if he could volunteer at the center. Victoria said yes. Over the following months, Robert Mitchell became one of Henderson Technologies' most passionate advocates. Robert Mitchell used his wealthy connections to bring in new donors and partners who supported the mission rather than trying to exploit it. One afternoon, 3 months after the boardroom confrontation, Victoria brought her mother, Dorothy, to visit the community center. Dorothy was frail now, walking with a cane, but Dorothy's mind was sharp and her spirit was strong. Victoria wheeled Dorothy through the classrooms, showing Dorothy everything they had built. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears as Dorothy watched young people, black, Latino, white, Asian, all working together learning skills that would change their lives. "Your father would be so proud," Dorothy whispered. "Baby girl, you kept the promise. You made his life count." In one classroom, they found Robert Mitchell teaching a basic business class to teenagers. When Robert Mitchell saw Victoria and Dorothy, Robert Mitchell came over immediately. "Mrs. Henderson," Robert Mitchell said to Dorothy, "I owe you an apology. I tried to destroy what your family built. I'm ashamed of what I did." Dorothy studied Robert Mitchell for a long moment. Then Dorothy smiled. The Lord doesn't call us to be perfect, son. He calls us to be faithful. You lost your way, but you found it again. That's what matters. Robert Mitchell knelt beside Dorothy's wheelchair. How did you do it? Robert Mitchell asked. How did you save that money for 27 years? It must have been so hard. Dorothy nodded. It was hard. There were times I wanted to use that money, times when Victoria needed things, when I needed things. But every time I was tempted, I would look at my husband's picture and hear his voice saying, "Make my life count, Dorothy. Make it count." So I saved every penny and I prayed every day that God would show us how to use it right. You changed so many lives, Robert Mitchell said. No, baby, Dorothy said gently. God changed the lives. I just said yes when he called. That evening, after Victoria took Dorothy back to the nursing home, Victoria returned to her apartment. Victoria knelt beside her bed, as Victoria did every night, to pray. Thank you, Lord, Victoria prayed. Thank you for my father's dream, my mother's faithfulness, and the chance to serve. Thank you for showing me that when you are for us, no weapon formed against us can prosper. Thank you for redeeming even Robert Mitchell. Help me to never forget that my success is built on sacrifice, and my mission is to honor those who came before me. Victoria's phone rang. It was James Peterson, the security guard. Mrs. Henderson, I'm sorry to call so late, James said, but I wanted you to know. My grandmother passed away this evening. Victoria's heart clenched. Oh, James, I'm so sorry. Thank you, but before she died, she made me promise to tell you something. She said, tell Mrs. Henderson that she's doing exactly what the Lord called her to do. Tell her not to ever compromise, not for money, not for success, not for anything. Tell her that her father is proud. Victoria's tears flowed freely now. Thank you for telling me, James. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She was, and Mrs. Henderson. She also said that when times get hard, and they will remember that she's praying for you from heaven now. She said the prayers of the faithful never stop, even after death. After Victoria hung up, Victoria sat in the darkness of her apartment, thinking about James's grandmother, about Victoria's own father, about all the people who had believed in justice and opportunity and passed that faith down through generations. The fight to keep Henderson Technologies independent wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more people like Richard Thornton who saw only profit potential, more board members who questioned whether mission-driven business could survive. But Victoria knew something they didn't know. Victoria knew that when you build something on the foundation of sacrifice and faith, when you honor the dreams of those who came before you, when you stay true to your purpose even when it costs you, that's when you become truly unshakable. Following Sunday, Victoria attended service at the same church where Victoria's mother had taken Victoria as a child. The pastor, a man who had known Victoria's father, asked Victoria to share her testimony. Victoria stood before the congregation, the same congregation that had prayed for Victoria when Victoria's father died, that had supported Dorothy through 27 years of widowhood, that had celebrated when Henderson Technologies opened its doors. Many of you know my story, Victoria began. You know about my father's dream and my mother's sacrifice, but I want to tell you what I've learned in these past few weeks. Victoria paused, looking out at the faces, young and old, rich and poor, united in faith. I've learned that when God plants a dream in someone's heart, that dream doesn't die with them. It gets passed down. It gets nurtured. It grows in ways the original dreamer never imagined. My father dreamed of a business that would serve our community. My mother watered that dream with her tears and her savings. And now, 30 years later, that dream has touched thousands of lives. Victoria's voice grew stronger. But I've also learned that keeping a dream alive requires courage. It requires standing firm when everyone tells you to compromise. It requires choosing principle over profit, mission over money, purpose over popularity. And sometimes, Victoria smiled, sometimes it requires showing grace to people who tried to destroy what you built because redemption is always possible. The congregation erupted in amens and applause. If God is for us, Victoria declared, who can be against us? If God plants a dream, who can uproot it? If God calls us to serve, who can stop us? The answer is nobody. Nobody can stand against what God has ordained. After the service, Robert Mitchell approached Victoria. Robert Mitchell had started attending the church, seeking to understand the faith that drove Victoria. That was powerful, Robert Mitchell said. I never understood faith like yours. I was raised in a church where we prayed for success and prosperity. We never talked about sacrifice or service. Victoria nodded. My mother used to say there are two kinds of faith. One asks God to bless what we want. The other asks God to help us want what he wants. The first faith is about comfort. The second is about transformation. I'm learning that, Robert Mitchell said. Slowly, but I'm learning. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, Henderson Technologies announced its most successful quarter in 5 years. The company had secured major grants from foundations that appreciated the mission-driven approach. 3 universities had partnered with Henderson Technologies to scale their programs nationally, and a documentary film crew was making a movie about Victoria's journey. But the moment that meant the most to Victoria came on a Tuesday afternoon when Victoria visited her mother at the nursing home. Dorothy was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. When Dorothy saw Victoria, Dorothy's face lit up. "Baby girl," Dorothy said, "I saw you on the news last night. They were talking about the company, about all the people you're helping." "It's not my company, Mama," Victoria said, pulling up a chair. "It's Daddy's dream and your sacrifice." "I'm just the steward." Dorothy took Victoria's hand. Dorothy's hand was thin now, the veins prominent, but her grip was still strong. "Victoria, I need to tell you something," Dorothy said. "Something I never told you before." "What is it, Mama?" "When your father died, I was angry at God," Dorothy said. "I was so angry. We had plans, dreams, a whole life ahead of us, and it was taken away. For a long time, I couldn't pray. I couldn't understand why God would let such a good man die." Victoria squeezed her mother's hand. "But then I realized something," Dorothy continued. "Your father didn't die for nothing. His death broke my heart, but it also broke it open. It made me understand sacrifice in a way I never had before. It made me understand that sometimes the greatest legacies come from the greatest pain. Your father's death taught me that love doesn't end when life does. Love continues. Love builds. Love transforms." Dorothy looked directly into Victoria's eyes. "I saved that money for 27 years not because I'm strong, baby. I saved it because every time I looked at you, I saw your father. Every time I was tempted to give up, I thought about his last letter, about his dream, about his belief that every person deserves a chance. And I knew that if I kept faith, if I stayed true to his vision, something beautiful would grow from all that pain." "And it did, Mama," Victoria said, tears streaming down Victoria's face. "It did." "Yes, it did," Dorothy agreed. "And now I can go to my grave knowing that your father's death meant something. His sacrifice changed the world, Victoria. Maybe not the whole world, but this part of it, this corner of Chicago, these thousands of people. That's enough. That's more than enough." Dorothy leaned back in her wheelchair, suddenly looking very tired. "Mama, are you okay?" Victoria asked, concerned. "I'm fine, baby, just tired. I'm 85 years old. I'm allowed to be tired." Dorothy closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "Victoria, when I'm gone, and it won't be long now, I want you to remember something. Remember that you come from a long line of faithful people. Your great-grandparents survived slavery. Your grandparents survived Jim Crow. Your father gave his life for freedom. I gave my life to honor his dream. And now you're giving your life to serve others. That's our family legacy. Not money, not fame, not success. Service, sacrifice, faith." "I'll remember, Mama, I promise." "And one more thing," Dorothy said, her voice growing soft. "Don't let anyone make you ashamed of putting mission before money. Don't let anyone convince you that profit is more important than purpose. In this world, everyone is trying to get ahead. But we Henderson women," Dorothy smiled, "we're called to lift others up. That's harder, that's lonelier, but that's what makes it holy work." Victoria stayed with her mother until Dorothy fell asleep. As Victoria watched Dorothy's chest rise and fall, Victoria thought about the incredible strength it must have taken to save that money for 27 years. To work as a nurse's aide, barely making enough to survive, and still put away every extra penny. To raise a daughter alone while carrying the weight of a dead husband's dream. Dorothy Henderson was a hero. Not the kind who gets parades or monuments, but the kind who shapes the future through quiet faithfulness. Dorothy passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 weeks later. The funeral was held at the same church where Dorothy had worshipped for 60 years. The sanctuary was packed not just with family and friends, but with hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Henderson Technologies. Victoria gave the eulogy. "My mother never sought recognition," Victoria said. "My mother worked in the shadows, saved in secret, prayed in private, but her faithfulness changed the world. She taught me that the most powerful legacies aren't built by those who seek glory, but by those who serve quietly, give sacrificially, and believe persistently." Victoria looked out at the congregation, seeing James Peterson in his military dress uniform, seeing Robert Mitchell sitting with tears streaming down his face, seeing the teenagers from the community center, seeing the business leaders who had learned to see beyond profit. "Mama, you did it," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "You kept Daddy's dream alive. You made his life count. And now his dream has become our dream and his legacy has become our mission. Rest well, Mama. Your work here is done. But what you built, it will continue. I promise you it will continue." The congregation sang Blessed Assurance. Dorothy's favorite hymn. As they sang, Victoria felt a peace settle over her. Dorothy and Marcus Henderson were together again, their sacrifice complete, their dream fulfilled, their faith vindicated. In the weeks after Dorothy's death, Victoria restructured Henderson Technologies to ensure the mission would outlive her too. Victoria created an endowment funded by a portion of company profits. Victoria established a board with a mandate to preserve the mission in perpetuity. Victoria wrote letters to be opened by future CEOs, just as her father had written letters to her. "To whoever leads this company after me," Victoria wrote, "remember that Henderson Technologies was built on sacrifice. Remember that it exists to serve the least, the last, and the lost. Remember that profit without purpose is poison, and success without service is spiritual death. Stay true to the mission, especially when it costs you." 1 year after Dorothy's death, Henderson Technologies opened the Dorothy Henderson Community Technology Center, the largest facility yet. The building stood on the same block where Dorothy had lived in that tiny apartment back in the 1960s. At the dedication ceremony, Victoria stood before a crowd of over 1,000 people, students, employees, community members, business leaders, politicians, and press. "This building represents more than bricks and mortar," Victoria said. "It represents faith that doesn't quit, love that doesn't end, and dreams that don't die. My father dreamed it in Vietnam before he died. My mother watered it with her tears and her savings. And now we continue it, not because we're extraordinary people, but because we've been entrusted with an extraordinary mission." Victoria paused, looking up at the building with her mother's name carved in stone above the entrance. "If God is for this work," Victoria declared, "no enemy can stand against it. No recession can stop it. No corporate raider can destroy it. No challenge can overcome it, because this isn't built on money or power or influence. It's built on sacrifice, watered with prayer, and sustained by faith. And that kind of foundation never crumbles." The crowd erupted in applause. As the ceremony ended and people toured the new facility, Victoria found a quiet corner and looked up at her mother's name. "We did it, Mama," Victoria whispered. "We kept the faith. We honored Daddy's dream. We made it count." And in that moment, Victoria felt a peace so profound it was almost tangible. Victoria had spent 30 years building something bigger than herself. Victoria had faced down enemies, overcome obstacles, and stayed true to her mission. Not because Victoria was stronger or smarter or more talented than anyone else, but because Victoria understood something fundamental. When you build your life on the sacrifices of those who came before you, when you stay faithful to principles that transcend profit, when you serve with humility and lead with grace, that's when you become truly powerful. Not powerful in the way the world measures power, but powerful in the way that changes lives, transforms communities, and leaves legacies that echo through generations. Victoria Henderson had learned what her father knew in Vietnam and her mother knew in that tiny apartment. If God is for you, truly for you, calling you and equipping you and sustaining you, then no weapon formed against you can prosper, no enemy can stand, and no obstacle can overcome what God has ordained. That evening, Victoria returned to her apartment. Victoria knelt beside her bed, as Victoria had done every night for 62 years, and prayed. "Thank you, Lord, for my father's dream, my mother's faith, and the privilege of serving. Thank you for showing me that success isn't measured by profit, but by people changed, lives transformed, and dreams fulfilled. Thank you for teaching me that when you are for us, no enemy, no matter how powerful, can stand against us. Help me to finish well, as my parents did, staying faithful to the end." And somewhere in that place beyond this world where faith becomes sight and tears are wiped away, Marcus Henderson smiled at his daughter's prayer while Dorothy Henderson whispered, "Well done, baby girl. Well done." Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.